At Enki, we speak a lot about fractional work. We say the word an awful lot, but we've often had the question back, what is fractional work? Is it sort of part-time? Is it interim? Is it something in between? Is it casual work? So the rationale behind this call is to jump into this and sort of answer a few questions behind fractional work. Particularly what we do at Enki is fractional finance, which is our niche. I think eventually we'll branch out into HR and legal and other realms as well. But for the purpose of this call, we'll be jumping into mostly fractional finance. So what is the context behind Enki and what is the context behind the fractional realm? Well, Greg and Caroline can speak to this better than I, but post-COVID, as with a lot of things changed, but the demand for fractional workers is something that really ticked up. So we found some stats from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics that stated that fractional job demand growth grew by 57% growth post-COVID. But maybe even more pressingly was, I guess, the anecdotal experience of both Greg and Caroline, who are the co-founders of Enki, who also run another recruitment business called Agora, who actually noticed in their own lives and in their own work experience the uptick in demand for those roles. So, Greg, you might be able to comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we saw a big increase in both kind of clients and people wanting to work fractionally. I think from where we were kind of, I started out in recruitment about 16, 17 years ago now, and I think back then it was very rare for people to recruit people externally in a fractional part-time way. It was very much it was only if someone had been in an organisation and wanted a bit more flexibility, we really saw it, but no one would actually go out to recruit people like in that way. So I think we've seen that big rise of it pick up, and there's a variety of different reasons for that I think we'll dip into. But that was the real kind of driver in launching Enki, is getting a recruitment product that could really service this kind of growing market.
Beautiful. So that growth in demand, we can more or less say it was due to a change of when and where we work. Obviously, with COVID and technology changing, the way that we think about and the way that we work changed, and that's largely due to companies wanting to cut costs, but still wanting to access great talent, and then B, professionals like yourselves want more autonomy, more variety, more flexibility in their work, and also more growth and more impact, which is something we'll chat about in a second. But really what this created was this almost perfect storm, in that companies wanted something, professionals wanted something, and we sort of met in the middle, and it gave rise to really the normality of fractional work.
Yeah, and now just adding on that, Jed, I think what the kind of pandemic led to was just that acceleration in people being able to work remotely as well. Through that, I think a lot of businesses had that set up, but I think the pandemic meant that every single organisation had to set themselves up to be able to work remotely, which I think again lends itself and makes fractional work more possible, which has led to the platform and the increase that we've seen since then.
Exactly right. So I think that nothing in that is too groundbreaking. We would have all heard that before. But something that's interesting now is the oncoming of AI. So there's a beautiful article. It was actually written by the CEO of a company called Connected, which some people may have heard about, which is actually the office next door to us at Enki. So very close in terms of proximity. And they also work in the fractional space. And he wrote a brilliant article about how UK businesses need to start considering fractional work. And a big driver behind that was the income of the sort of arrival of a lot of AI and automations in regard to business operations. And for a lot of companies now, the real advantage they'll have is the way that they deploy their human intelligence. So fractional workers or fractional professionals can now do the jobs of 2 or 3 people, and it's all about now sort of who can you get to fill that fractional role, particularly a more strategic role, and how can they execute for your organization. So we have this sort of perfect storm post-COVID, and our AI is coming on. So this idea of fractional work has become even more pertinent as we move along. So Greg gave a little rundown of Enki, but really, why did we start Enki and what is it? What is Enki? It's a marketplace and community that connects pre-vetted fractional finance professionals with companies, and we started it because really there was no solution for this. Traditionally, for landing a job or landing a role, you would either go on a job board if you're the candidate or your person looking for the job, and if you're the company, you would post it on a job board or you would go to a recruiter. But these systems don't quite work for fractional work because if you're the company hiring off a job board, you'll get 1,000 applicants and maybe only 30 are truly fractional. And then if you're applying for those fractional roles, you're competing against 1,000 people that aren't quite relevant for the role. So what we've done at Enki is create a space and community for specifically fractional roles. We talk to the companies, we are your sales pipeline, and we funnel the roles down to our community. I think everyone gets that at this stage. But let's get stuck in. Caroline, I'll hand over to you and you can get talking as to what fractional work actually is, because I know we say the word a lot, but I think myself and everyone in this call would really appreciate some clarity from your end.
Great. Thanks, Jed. Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Jed has said, we've had a huge amount of interest from people wanting to join our Enki community, and we're seeing huge demand as well from businesses wanting to hire fractional professionals. But despite that, lots of people still don't really know what it is. I know lots of my friends who don't work in recruitment who see my posts on LinkedIn kind of commonly ask me what is fractional? I think a lot of people think, is it just a fancy rebrand for part-time work? Is it interim? Are fractional roles more project-based, or can they be business as usual? There are loads of interpretations out there as to what working fractionally actually means. And that's essentially because it's a dynamic and flexible working model, and it can come in lots of different forms. So fractional work in its truest sense involves a professional offering their expertise to multiple clients or businesses on a part-time or project basis, rather than being a full-time employee of any single organization. But in reality, how that looks can really differ from person to person and on a case-by-case basis. So you could be working full-time 5 days a week on permanent contracts with 3 different businesses. So you could do 2 days with one, 2 days with another, and a day with other, and you'd be on the payroll of each company. Or you could be working part-time on a permanent basis. So I suppose in that sense, it is the rebrand of part-time, but that's I suppose less frequent. So you could just do 1, 2, 3 days a week with one business and then not work for the other 2. And typically on a permanent fractional basis, whereby you're going on the payroll, the roles are more business as usual as opposed to delivering on a specific project, but you could be doing both. If you aren't working on someone's payroll, you could also be working on an interim basis across a portfolio of clients, and therefore operating on a day rate basis. And typically in those interim roles, the deliverables are more project based. So, perhaps they're looking to hire an FD or a CFO to bring finance in house and build out that function, or help them with some strategic financial planning, or building a cash flow model. So that could be on a more of a project basis, and they could bring in a CFO to build everything out for 3 months on a contract, and then once all that's done, then maybe they hire someone on a permanent fractional basis, more at the financial controller level, for 2, 3, 4 days a week, just to run the team more on a BAU level once all of the setup has been done. So that's quite a common thing that we see in smaller businesses. And obviously in that capacity, you might be operating on a set number of days a week or on a month, or maybe you just have a project to deliver in a set time frame as opposed to having a fixed number of days a week. So lots of variables, but at its core, it's a dynamic, flexible working model that you are essentially able to build around your preferences and your skill set.
Beautiful. Caroline, there's this notion of a portfolio career, like building a portfolio career as opposed to sort of being a one company person. Can you touch on how, I guess, fractional is almost a new operating model for operating your career, and that now you can build that portfolio career. You can work here, you can work for 3 companies at the same time, as opposed to sort of one company and then to the next. It seems like we have quite a contrast now in terms of career operating models.
Yeah, that's right. And it's becoming really popular. Obviously, you've touched on why it's important for, or I suppose a great option for companies that are scaling in terms of, they can do so now due to technology. They want to keep their operational costs down. But for professionals, it's a great way to accelerate your career. You get experiences across, a wide range of businesses, experiencing different challenges. Perhaps you're working across various industries. So it can be a great way to really, I suppose, gain a broad range of experiences quicker than you would do in a more traditional working model.
Brilliant. I think I just want to reiterate that operating model sentiment, because I think that's a really good way to think of it. It's a different way to to pursue a career. One way is to go one company at a time, and that's what most of us are used to, and that's what's normal. But the new normal now, or something else that's coming on, is now fractional work, where you can work for multiple companies at the same time. And I think that mindset shift is super important. But enough hearing about what fractional work is from us. I think, of course, we love talking about it, but I think it's a lot more interesting to hear about it from the people that are actually in the industry and doing the work. So we actually have a few of our Enki community members in this call. We have Aisling, Matt, and Sven, who all have joined our pre-vetted community of fractional professionals at Enki. And I'm just going to get them to quickly introduce themselves and ask a few questions or answer a few questions for the people in this call, because I think that's where the true value is. So, Matt, I might get you to introduce yourself first and give us a little insight into your sort of fractional story and how you started how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jed. I've been a CFO, COO, and latterly a managing director for about the last 25 years or so. When my MD role ended, and it ended quite, let's say, not amicably, let's put it like that, I was sort of licking my wounds and looking for something else to do. And I picked up a project role, which was to do with finance and buying and merchandising. I'm a retail expert by background. That then morphed into the need for a new finance director, because the finance director was leaving as not as a result of me coming in, but as a result of what was going on. And that then sort of floated the option for me of becoming a fractional CFO. I really enjoyed the company I was working with and the people that were there. And so I thought, right, okay, well, if I can make this work, I can use this as like my sort of tentpole client, if you like, and see if I can hang other bits and pieces off it. And that was probably about 18 months or so ago now. And in that 18 months, I would say I have seen the market explode, really, in terms of the options available for fractional work and the number of marketplaces or people like yourselves who can see the direction of travel that things are going in, and so it's and there's more and more people from a CFO side who are interested in exploring that as well.
I think what you touched on there, almost the notion that fractional is becoming mainstream to a degree. In your experience, has it become normal for companies to now really look at fractionals as a genuine option? And also, what type of companies do you think generally suit fractional professionals like yourself?
Firstly, yes, I think whether the name change from part-time to fractional has helped, made it slightly more sophisticated. I don't know, but in my view, there's probably two main areas where a fractional C-suite person is useful. One is startup, because startup want to be lean, they want to be agile, they want to be fast moving, and they're skint. So they either give you equity in terms of remuneration, which if you wanted to go down that route, that's fine, or they pay you for a small amount of your time in order to give them the advice that they absolutely desperately need from your expertise. The second area is really SMEs, something up to say 10, 15 million pound a year turnover, where they need that advice. They're perhaps more established, but they can't afford 5 days a week for a CFO.
No, it makes sense. That's what we found with Enki as well. I guess that's the size and type of company that really benefits from fractional workers. Thanks so much for sharing, Matt. We've also got Sven on the call. Sven is a different story to Matt, because Matt's sort of 18 months into his fractional journey or operating model so far. But Sven, maybe you can give a bit of a background on yourself, because you were working at a VC and you had a portfolio of companies under your provision, and now you're sort of moving into the fractional space on more of like an independent basis. Would that be right?
Yeah, very happy to give the background. So my background really was in late stage VC before I then went to a VC. And the way that worked out was that I was on payroll, but I was looking after 3 of their businesses in parallel, and they all could have been considered early stage. So call it anything up to 5 to 10 million ARR. And as I then sold one of the businesses and closed another one, I realized, actually, why not doing this outside of this specific VC? Why not looking for businesses in the market? And what I found was basically two directions really, where there's pull in the market. One is for very specific sets of skills. So call it investment readiness or M&A, where you effectively come in and just add a skill set that currently doesn't exist in the leadership team, doesn't exist in the current finance team. And that's usually something thought after by PE in particular quite strongly. And the other pull really comes from this early stage market segment where you have businesses that might have a head of finance or might have all their finance outsourced sometimes even, and they now really think about how to bring it to the next level. And they have usually the option to either bring someone in on a reasonably junior level as head of finance, call it at 90 to 100 grand a year, who does everything 5 days a week, or they bring someone in at the same price for 3 days a week, someone who's done it before, who's seen what good looks like. And I think for most of them, they are quite open to the idea of fractional because they see the benefit of someone who's done it before. But I wouldn't say that it's a given yet that people are ready and open to that. There's still an educational exercise to be done there. But once you talk through the benefits, people seem to be quite open to these ideas. Even more so if they have something like a raise ahead of them, where they need a very specific skill set that you otherwise just can't afford on a full-time basis for that budget.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think also, Sven, you highlighted there sort of two ways of working fractionally, one being fractional permanent, so very much with a lot of early stage businesses, just like the jam jar who we had pitched this morning to us at Enki. We had a company or a CEO come and pitch a live role. He was very much looking for a fractional permanent CFO to sort of join the company right from inception or funding, more or less, all the way up until hopefully an eventual sale. And then on the flip side, you've also got this fractional interim niche where bigger companies, scale ups or even larger will get a fractional CFO, for example, or a fractional FD to come in and fill a very specific gap. For example, if they've got niche experience in fundraising or so on. So fractional is quite varied, but I think the beauty of it is it fits your life, it fits your model, it fits whatever you need it to be quite nicely. We also have a third Enki community member on the call here, being Aisling. Aisling,
hi.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming here. You've actually just landed your most recent fractional or formalized a fractional role this week, I believe, at Peachy's. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I've been with Peachy's for a little while. I just hadn't updated my LinkedIn. I'm a bit tardy with that. Yes, so for me, my last sort of proper role was an interim CFO at Estrade, which was full-time, very full on. They're around 70 million revenue, really interesting stage of their journey, but that was only ever interim as they had a permanent coming in. So it was a lovely sort of 5 months to think about what I wanted to do. And sort of when I was in the mix 5 days a week, doing it all, I thought, the fractional just might suit me a little better for a few reasons. Obviously, I think people touch on the lifestyle element, which is for sure a factor, and just having control over your own week. I sort of felt a bit when I was in that role, I felt a bit, oh my God, somebody wants me to go to the office 4 days a week. How will I manage that? So it's quite nice for sure to manage your own week. I would say that comes with pros and cons, which I'll come to in a minute. But the big part for me, which I've mentioned to you before, Jed, is just the sort of trying before you buy. I think we've all worked for people that, especially I typically work in founder businesses, startup scale up type level. and you never know. You go to an interview, you meet somebody twice, you just never quite know what it's going to be really like. So for me, a big element was the spreading of myself across, 2-3 different businesses. And I sort of expect to not be in fractional forever, in that if one of these businesses at some point just says, takes off, maybe then I'll reassess. And if they say, Aisling, we want you to come full time, I can reassess at that stage. But the real win for me was just spreading myself across 2 or 3. Try before you buy, as it were. So that's a big win for me.
Beyond just try before you buy, what you're sort of referencing there is going for breadth as opposed to depth.
For sure.
Beyond sort of getting the ability to dip your toe into a business and wait and sort of suss out if you want to go full time with them or so on. What are the other advantages do you think in terms of, I guess, career acceleration do you get from optimizing for breadth over depth?
Well, of course, I mean, even a simple example, I'm trying to raise funds for one company, I'm talking to Wayflyer, another company needs the same thing. You can really leverage your same relationships and your same conversations sometimes for a few different clients, which works quite well, I would say.
Well, what about the trope of like some people from the outside will think, a fractional CFO is someone, or finance director, or whatever your title is, but it's someone that is maybe winding down or wants to take a foot off the pedal a bit. I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago on one of our community calls for Enki. That's not the case for you.
No, not at all. And actually, it's really interesting because somebody said something to me last week about, because I have a young family, and isn't it great for you now that you have a young family that you can do this? And it sort of peeved me off because I thought, what are you talking about? I'm super ambitious. I want to keep going. I just so happen to be doing it this way. It's, slightly less traditional, doing the interview rounds, trying to get my next role. For me, it's about spreading myself across a number of opportunities to see, what lands or what works, or, and who you meet as well. And everything, as we all know, networking is huge. And you're just spreading that network all the time, meeting different people 5 days a week. So yeah, for me, I get it, and that's probably amazing for loads of people. The sort of the wind down, and maybe in 15 years I'll be there as well, and I'll say, yeah, that's what I want to do. But for me right now, it's really not about wind down. Lifestyle is a nice part of it. It's nice having control, but it's really not the main driver for me.
Yeah, I spoke a couple of weeks ago to the CFO at HSBC in APAC, so quite a really good guy, and he said he was thinking of going fractional, sort of moving into fractional as a way to build out his portfolio of experiences really before he maybe moves into private equity or something of that type. So you can almost use it strategically in your career as a bridge between what you have done and what you want to do, and working fractionally. If you can work for 5 companies in the same year, and it can help you build out your resume and do it in that way. In a similar sense, maybe for do you think if you're, say, a mid-level fractional finance professional, and Sven, Matt, feel free to jump in here as well, would going fractional for someone that's mid-level would it help them get to that, say, CFO level quicker than if they were to go down the single company path?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, it definitely can, because you can pick and choose your mandates based on the gaps you have to fill on your CV. So let's say you want to do the exit, you want to do the M&A, as long as you can evidence that you can do it. A fractional way is an amazing opportunity to kind of just get this on and then move on to the next one, probably much easier than it often is in a single company.
So it sounds like fractional is incredible right now. Wow, everyone wants to be fractional. It's the dream, all the rest. But there's definitely a flip side to it, in that I guess just from our experience from Enki, I'll get your thoughts in a second, that it's great to have the flexibility and autonomy to sort of direct your own life and work life, and you can be working 2 days a week on a high date rate and then have the rest of your week off, which is heaven. But often that comes with having to source your own work, having to sort of be very self-disciplined, which no doubt everyone is, but make sure you're getting the work done to a standard and integrating into the teams properly as well. But Matt, maybe you can touch on what are the hard parts about being fractional in your experience to date?
The hard parts are, I think, twofold. Let's set aside the networking and sort of pipeline development piece for one side, because if you're not somebody that's comfortable with developing a pipeline, go join the CFO Center. If you are, then this sort of forum is the ideal place. But there's two things for me. It's either feast or famine. You've either got 8 days work a week or you've got one. That seems to be my experience anyway. I'd prefer to have something like 3 to 4. That'd be lovely, but life doesn't seem to always work out like that. Hopefully it will in the future. And the second one is mission creep, and in particularly time creep. You know, if you're employed 1 day a week, you work 1 day a week. And with it, especially in SMEs, there is an expectation, maybe different in the finance and the fintech sector, but there's an expectation for FaceTime. So somebody will say, right, I want you to work 1 day a week. I'd like you to be in the office for that 1 day a week. And then they'll message you for the other 4 days a week on top of that. And that's not 1 day a week in my view.
That really resonates, Matt, and I'm new on my fractional journey, so I'm trying to figure out the sort of boundaries that I can set. You know, even last Monday, a client called me in a panic that, you know, these questions had to go back to an investor by end of day. And it just so happened I was free, and I just sort of, you know, I think I was going to have a nice day and go to the gym, etc. And I dropped that, did the work. But I did think, I was like, God, how would I have managed this had I actually been working for somebody else that day? How would I, you know, yeah, so I think the boundaries for me, as I said, this is only my 3rd month doing fractional. It's worked out magically so far, but I know that there will come a time when I'm going to have some tough conversations.
I might open up to the floor. If anyone has a question now, I'm keen to get stuck in maybe into the nature of the work that you do as well, and also what you wish you knew. So give Sven a bit of advice before he jumps fully in. But if anyone has a question now, feel free to ask and chuck your hand up for these guys, because I'm sure they'd be happy to answer anything you have. If not, it's all good. I'll keep rocking and rolling. No worries. Feel free to chuck your hand up at any point. But just on the nature of the work, obviously, everyone or you three are at that senior level. So would I be right in saying that the nature of the work is generally more strategic, or does it change depending on how many days a week you're working? Like, I'm sure if you're working 1 day a week, it's very strategic and high level, but maybe if you're working 3 or 4, it's a lot more nitty gritty. How does it sort of vary? Sven, hand up.
Yeah, I'd say it really depends on the business and their challenges, and it's just so important to clarify this ahead of time. The one that I'm working with currently, the initial assignment was to say, help us with the funding, and what it ended up being is help us with our broken accounting system as well, please. So it's really important to clarify this ahead of time, and then to the point of scope creep, be very clear about what you charge for what. And how you deal with that, especially if you have multiple portfolio companies that you try to run at the same time.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there is an expectation when you go in as a fractional CFO that you could also do the bank rec for them if you really wanted. I really don't like doing bank recs. And you have to be pretty clear, because we're paid a reasonable amount of money, and that reasonable amount of money should give them expert advice, guidance, and help. If they want somebody to do the transactional work, I'm perfectly happy to find people for them to do that. But I'd prefer not to do it myself. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, and I am. It so happens that I'm with a lot of startups, so it feels a bit like you're registering them as an employer with Companies House, and then you're also doing a model for them to get funding, and it feels very broad sometimes. The level of work, you know, it can be very in the detail, and it can be very strategic. You know, model building, talking to investors, all of those. nice things, but equally you're nearly looking at the date and saying, oh, do people get paid? It's payday, you know. So yes, I would agree with that, Matt, that it can be very broad.
Greg, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just had one question, like on that challenge with regards to, I suppose, getting stuck into those more nitty-gritty elements. What are your guys' thoughts on AI coming into that space and improving kind of automation? Will that make it easier to delineate that challenge and make sure that you're working on the strategic stuff? I'd be just keen to get your thoughts on where you think that could impact the function and fractional work in the future as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm actually setting up a business at the moment which will look at providing accounting services to fractional CFOs as well. And part of that will be leveraging AI as much as possible, because, you know, AI is coming for a lot of people's jobs. And as soon as we get AI agents that can crawl across your inbox, take an invoice out on a PDF, scan it into OCR and dump it into Xero, you know, the amount of AP and AR and transactional people you need in a finance team is going to drop really significantly. And I don't think we're that far away from it. On top of that, you've then got the traditional financial analysis piece, where something like the sort of the deep research models in both Claude and ChatGPT can now produce pretty good quality analysis in 10 to 15 minutes, compared to a finance analyst that you'd probably be paying 50, 60K a year for.
Yeah, you'd hope, Greg, there's some truth to it that AI will hopefully bring on the rise of fractional work, because it was sort of my rationale for the opening 2 slides here. So it's good to hear. Good to hear we've got a bit of confirmation. Just before we move on to a little bit of, I guess, information from us, particularly from Greg, regarding pretty much how much money people can make in fractionally and what people generally make and where day rates and so on sit and how to charge yourself out. For anyone that's thinking about going fractional or interested in the space, I know, Sven, you're not there yet, even though you've done very similar things. Aisling and Matt, what would be your advice, or what did you wish you knew before you got into fractional work?
And for me, obviously, I'm at the start of my journey, so I think I will. There's some of the things that Matt has mentioned I have seen already in my 2 months: the scope creep, the time creep, all of those things. I think there's a big BD piece which I didn't quite appreciate. Like, for example, and because of my background, I've done a lot of beauty, and there's a lot of beauty brands out there, and they want to chat to you. And you've spoken to them, you've spoken to their husband, you've looked at their models, you've done all this, and you've put 4 or 5 hours in, and then they realize they can't really afford you, and that's fine. But you've sort of met 4 or 5 hours of your life that's gone, not to be redeemed. So I would say there's a good bit of BD. So that's great that Enki and things like this evolve, so that maybe there will be less of that. And for me, just, you definitely need some runway, because you have to be quite comfortable that there's months that you don't make a full salary, or that I haven't, because I'm just at the start, and that's fine. But I just keep saying to people, just make sure you have runway, so you're not taking shitty jobs that you don't want to take. That's what I would say.
Great advice. Matt, we'll finish with you here, then we'll go next slide.
Yeah, I just echo Aisling's comments. There's you deal with people, and you think, okay, well, this is going to be a permanent role, and then that only lasts 6 weeks, and then you then say, oh, this is only a 6-week role, and it lasts, forever. It feels like it lasts forever, depending. But yeah, I think you have to be comfortable with uncertainty. You have to be comfortable with, as you said, developing your own network, building a pipeline, going out, meeting people, having coffees, and that you need to set aside time in your weekly diary to do, and regard business development as part of your job, and not just something you do when you haven't got some CFO stuff to do.
That's a really good point to finish on, because I think you have to shift your mindset towards like that. You have to be more entrepreneurial, really, because you're running your own business at the end of the day. You're in charge of how much money you make, so you've got to go out and sort of chase and capture that business. Thank you guys so much for that. I predicted a few of your comments and summarized them here. So I think we sort of captured everything here in terms of the pros and cons, or as I've said, the attractions of fractional work and what to consider. The attraction, one of them being breadth over depth, so you can work across multiple industries and multiple company types and gain and sharpen your skills faster. You can accelerate your learning and development. So if you want to move from that mid-level sort of finance professional to the senior level, you can work for 5 companies in a year, which you just can't do when you're working for one company at a time. You can have a bigger impact, as in multiple organizations as opposed to one team. You can grow faster, as I said. You can potentially earn more, but it's not always like this. But of course, if you're billing for 4 or 5 days per week on your day rate, you're likely going to earn more than your salary. And you've also got the freedom to sort of design your own career path, more or less, which I think that's the autonomy that a lot of people are craving. Then to consider as well, the flexibility is great, but also on the flip side, you've got the unpredictability of, as Matt said, you don't know if your 6-week role or 6-month role is going to roll on to a 3-year role. So there's that sort of give and take that you naturally have with fractional work. The autonomy, again, is great. You can choose your own hours, more or less, or days, I should say. But on the flip side, you don't necessarily have a weekly structure. You don't necessarily have the support, which is somewhere that Enki tries to help with in providing that fractional community for fractional professionals. And again, you have more control of your time, but you've also got to try and sort of self-manage yourself. What you wish you knew, Ashley, and you said it, and I'm happy you said it because Greg raised it as well. You need to have a runway, because you just, at the end of the day, the best way often to think about it is you're starting a business, and the business is you working fractionally. It's a new operating model. It's a new way to be, and you've got to chase your own leads and your own clients. So you've got to have runway for that, in the same way that it would be if you were starting a company, because you are. It takes time to build a pipeline, as we've said, so some good predictions here. So keep that in mind. Scope creep is real. Set boundaries. We've also spoken about that. And just to reiterate the fact that you're sort of an entrepreneur at the end of the day, you'll need to sell yourself. Even if you're really good, you still need to be able to sell yourself, because you're interviewing for every role you have. So keep that in mind as well. Just on the key, before we get to Greg, who's going to touch on the finance side of things, and presumably we all love finance because we're finance professionals, except for me. But some key takeaways in terms of ideal traits for a fractional professional or fractional finance professional, specifically here. And this is taken from one of our community members at Enki, who actually presented this in one of our bi-weekly calls. But I'll just run through this. Confidence across systems, people, and industries. Obviously, your work is going to be incredibly varied, so you've got to be good with people, good with collaboration, and good with integrating into different operating systems as well. You've got to be incredibly flexible and available. The availability is quite hard, because even now, I think Ashley, Matt, and Sven, you might have your availability, you might have your formal availability being as sort of 1 day per week, but sometimes you can push the 1.5 if you want to work a little bit on the weekend, or you can push 2 if you really want to make it work. So as Matt said, sort of it rains, it pours sometimes. You may not know when the next role comes in. So sometimes you've got to sort of give and take there. You've got to be really disciplined on your scoping of the role and your expectation setting. That's something that we've said a few times now, but it's true. At the end of the day, if you get paid for 1 day, you get paid for 1 day. So taking those calls from Monday to Friday probably doesn't fit into your scope. Again, we've touched on this, but it's good that it's here as well. That networking and relationship building piece, as Matt said, it's really advantageous if you consider that part of your work week and work life now, and actually set out time to do it. And lastly, just to reiterate again, that entrepreneurial mindset. You're running your business. The business is you. The business is your time and your expertise. So you have to think about it like that. And one thing that comes with that is maybe something you don't consider or think about when you're working for one company of 500 people. But it's that personal branding aspect as well, and getting yourself out there. people won't know to work with you unless they know who you are at the end of the day. And a lot of that is with the face-to-face networking and getting to know people. But the flip side of that is doing that at scale, which is obviously creating content, sharing value online, and telling stories, and providing takeaways from what you do in your own work and life. So that's probably another shift towards fractional that you have to think about, in that people won't know to work with you unless A, you're part of Enki, in which they will, or B, if you're putting content out yourself. But without further ado, we'll hand over to Greg, because I'm sure everyone's really interested in knowing sort of how to price themselves and how it all works in the long run. And you can see on the right there, we've got a few stats from our Enki community as well, which is quite interesting, and I think is accurate, more or less, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Yeah, I've got the fun job on the right side. I think, look, as we grow Enki and as we get more data from people that are working in the community, everything that we're kind of harnessing here, I think we'll be able to give real insights into what people should be charging, I think, for fractional work within the market. We're really committed to make sure that the fractional people within our community are getting paid what they deserve, and our whole business model, we'll never take a cut of anyone's rate for anyone that's kind of working through Enki. We really want to make sure that we're maximising the ability for a fractional finance professional to earn. So by helping them on the branding and the sales leads, as well as making sure that they're charging themselves in the right way. And the feedback that we've got, I think, from a lot of the community, and you've heard it a little bit on the call today, is all around having that personal runway to make sure that you don't have to be in those situations where you're taking work or lower rates than you should be. And it's a real tricky negotiation a lot of the time, because of the market of people that are looking to hire fractionally. They are tight on budgets, and it's making sure that they're getting the value from what you're offering to them. And I think that's the beauty of the whole fractional space. So where we are at the moment, so the data there on the right is very much kind of the average day rates that we're seeing across our community at this point in time. So I think that's probably based on about 65 kind of professionals in the UK that are operating in that way. As we develop, what we're looking to do is really kind of break that down into kind of size of business. If we've got kind of CFO work where they're working very much at kind of seed or pre-seed or very early stage businesses, we want to really kind of break that data down, and by region, and bear with us, because I think as we continue to grow this is definitely something that we'll be able to to work in. One of the key things that we do see, it depends on the arrangement. So if someone's got a 2, 3, 4 day a week role that's longer term, often that rate will come down, because you do get that added security within that contract. And if it's a shorter contract but less time, it tends to be slightly higher. So I think that's something to always bear in mind in how you're actually kind of breaking up your week, because I think if you're working across 3 or 4 different clients, it's very often that you might be charging different things for the work you're doing within them. One of the big conversations that we're seeing across the community at the moment is actually people that want to charge their time. So be that by a day rate, or be that by an hourly rate, or people that want to charge as a project or a deliverables model. And I think, again, this will vary very much kind of client by client and the type of work that you're looking to do, but it's something really to bear in mind. At the moment, the data we've got and what we're seeing is from a kind of day rate perspective, and people kind of working across their own limited companies in that way. But we are seeing more projects, especially around key things like fundraising or transformation, or people that are actually coming in and helping and looking at kind of existing finance teams as well. So that there is an opportunity for a blend of both, and we want to continue to really drive that conversation and see how people are working through that. Again, it was touched on in a lot of what's kind of, I think Ashley put it quite well, is making sure that if you are kind of working outside of those hours and things are kind of dragging along, it's making sure that you're charging, the boundaries are up. You know that if you're doing that extra work, you're getting paid for it, and you're working across different things there. Now the day rates we have here are for contract work. We've also got, like, similarly, we'll be building out full-time fractional as well, which tends to be, so if we're looking at a kind of an FD rate there of kind of 660 for full-time, we're probably looking at an equivalent of anywhere from like 120 to 130 grand prorated down to the day as well, if we're looking at that perspective, and we're seeing a blend of people. I think the majority we're seeing is more on the day rate side, mainly because a lot of those roles and the project nature of it means that it kind of lands outside of IR35, and actually because of the businesses that a lot of people are supporting, they can be less than 50 employees or less than, I think it's 10 million in turnover, so it means that they can work outside of IR35, and obviously the tax benefit of doing that is high. So we do see the majority of it at the moment being at a day level. Go for it, Jed.
Greg, just we had an Enki community member get in touch with me, I think a couple of weeks ago, and they asked, what should my day rate be, essentially? And you gave me a quick little formula that people can use as a bit of a guide based on their salary to calculate that. Would you be able to share that?
Yeah, I think historically it's always like a midpoint that we see is kind of like we tend to kind of half the salary. So if you're on a 100,000, we tend to kind of see it as that would be the equivalent to a 500 day rate, so half and another zero. We have got formulas and we can share that with the community, because what you do is obviously you save the employer on a lot of kind of NI costs and holiday and everything like that. But that's what I'd say to anyone if they're looking at it from a midpoint perspective. But I actually think you've got to think about it differently. You've got to think about the market and the types of businesses that you're supporting. You've got to see that sweet spot. It's a little bit like you were saying with regards to starting your own business and having that runway. It's actually being like, right, how is this landing within the communities and the people that I'm and I think it's also not being afraid when you're pitching yourself into those businesses to make sure that you're really kind of like delivering that value and not underselling yourself. So I think that's always a key thing to do is testing that, and then trying to, and if there is that disconnect with people's budgets, it's often how you can be creative around that, be it completion bonuses, equity, something we've not talked about, but with smaller businesses, that's again like another carrot where businesses can be flexible, and it's about trying to be creative to see how that works. Go for it, Sven.
Yeah, just quickly to echo that point around day rates. I've seen a lot of kind of educational work to be done, especially for early stage businesses where they just struggle translating an annual salary into a day rate. So having this story and a back of an envelope calculation ready for them, such that they understand that they can actually afford a higher day rate than they might think initially, is extremely helpful.
Yeah, that's actually the plan, Sven. It's a good way for us to get, to be honest, for companies to engage with us, because one of the apprehensions I think in even hiring fractionally is that they don't know necessarily how to do it or who they need or how much they can pay. So yeah, I think we'll definitely integrate that going in.
And I think also what they're getting, and I think that's tricky. I think a lot of the time the people hiring these roles could be a founder that's never worked with an FD before, and I think sometimes not actually knowing the value and the impact of that day rate can make on your organization, and until you're seeing that, it can be really hard. So again, like we're wanting to really kind of elevate that conversation and make sure people are seeing the impact that it can make as well.